It started on Halloween, in the afternoon. It was still light outside, although the heavy cloud cover took away some of the sun's power. But I wasn't expecting any trick-or-treaters until 5 or 6 at the latest, which was why I was surprised to see a lone child in a ghost costume on my phone just after my doorbell camera alerted me to movement. I watched on the camera as the child came up the front porch steps of my house. Given the height of the kid, I figured he or she was no older than 10. But I waited to see if anyone else would show up before I opened the door. The kids in my neighborhood usually went trick-or-treating in small groups. Or at the very least, they went with their parents. At least kids this young did. But I saw no one else in my front yard or on the sidewalk. The little ghost came up and stopped right in front of my door. And it was only then that I realized the kid had no bag or bucket for candy. I got up from my seat, phone still in hand, and went to the door. I stopped, waiting for the kid to ring the doorbell. But that didn't happen. The costumed child just stood there. As I stared at the camera, a feeling like squirming insects filled my belly, sending tendrils of fear through my body. Finally, after chastising myself for being ridiculous, I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. My porch was empty. There was no child. I looked down at my phone, seeing that the child was gone from there too. Rewinding the recorded clip, I watched it from the beginning, but there was nothing except an empty porch and yard. There was no kid in a ghost costume. I shut the door and shook my head, telling myself I was letting my imagination run wild. I had been dozing in my chair when I'd gotten the alert. Maybe it was a dream leaking into the real world. But if that was the case, why would I have a recording on my phone? The doorbell didn't record anything unless it was triggered by movement. I got back into my chair and settled in to continue my nap. But my phone chimed again. When I looked at the app, I now saw 2 kids in costumes. One in the ghost costume and a boy in some superhero getup. The ghost costume was generic, but there was something about the superhero getup that struck a chord in me. They both walked up and stood in front of my door, waiting, staring, almost as if they could see through the door. It's a coincidence, I told myself. Lots of those costumes around, lots of them. I hit the button to work the speaker on the doorbell camera and said, "If you want candy, you have to ring the doorbell." Neither kid even acknowledged that they heard me. I got up from my seat and rushed over to the door, grabbing the bowl of candy from the side table. I wrenched the door open, only to find my porch empty. Slamming the door, I turned and stalked back toward my seat, those tendrils of panic wrapping around my heart and lungs. It was only when I got to my seat that I realized I still had the bowl of candy in my hand. As I was about to set it down, my phone chimed again. I picked the device up in my free hand and looked at the feed from the doorbell camera. This time, there were 4 kids. The same 2 from earlier, and then 2 more. A boy and a girl, dressed as a soldier and a princess. These 2 were slightly bigger, so I figured they were a little older. "It's them," a voice in my head screeched. "It's them!" "Don't be ridiculous," I said aloud. Then I saw an adult back behind the kids, walking up the sidewalk as the children stopped in front of my door. "Oh, thank God, finally an adult," I said. But as I watched the man come up the walkway, I saw that his head was split open. His face was bloody, and he walked with a limp, his left arm twisted and hanging awkwardly. "That's some costume," I said. "It's no fucking costume," my inner voice said. "It's them." Shaking my head, I moved over to the front door again, setting my phone down on the side table. I opened the door. Again, there was nothing but an empty porch. No kids, no adult, just the chilly fall afternoon. I shut the door and turned around. My fingers went limp as I saw that 5 of them were in my house. I dropped the bowl of candy, dumping the sweets all over my floor. But that was the least of my worries. The children rushed me, their little hands like daggers as they dug into my stomach, ripping through flesh and yanking my intestines out as they pulled me to the floor. I heard myself screaming at the immense pain, but part of me was transported to that day a year ago. I'd been driving home from work on Halloween afternoon when a minivan came up and started riding my ass on the 2-lane highway. There was a double yellow line, so no passing. I'd been going the speed limit, but I slowed down even more to try to get the guy off my ass. When that didn't work, I sped up, but the guy still stayed right behind me. Finally, when the road was clear in both directions as far as I could see, I slammed on the brakes. To avoid hitting me, the guy swerved to the right, running off the road and down the embankment toward the wall of trees there. I glanced out the window as the vehicle moved past mine, and I caught a glimpse of a couple of kids in the back, dressed in their Halloween costumes. I saw a little superhero, and a ghost, and a soldier, and a princess. And then they were lost from view as the man driving tried to get back on the road. It was a bad move. The back of the van slewed sideways and then the thing flipped, rolling at least twice before it crashed into a couple of trees. I hadn't meant to kill them. I just wanted to scare the driver, to get him to stop tailgating me. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault! I screamed as the children tore my organs out. The man stood over me, his brain showing through his split skull. "And this isn't my fault," he said, bringing his heel up and then smashing it down on my face. As my wife and I were sitting in bed, my phone buzzed with a notification. I set my book down and grabbed my phone, seeing that it was a notification from the new doorbell camera I'd just installed. I opened the notification and saw myself, my wife, and my 6-year-old son at the front door. I immediately knew it was a recording from earlier because it was daylight outside. "Oh, great," I said. "What?" Andrea said, looking up from her book. "That doorbell camera thing is already malfunctioning." I extended my phone so she could see. She quickly paused the video as the recorded me was about to open the door to let everyone in. Then she studied it. "When is this from?" "Must be from today. I only installed the thing last night." Andrea shook her head. "I don't recognize this toy Raymond is holding," she said, angling the phone and pointing at a blue and white plush elephant Ray had in one hand. I didn't recognize it either. "Maybe we just didn't notice," I said, shrugging. "If it keeps up, I guess I'll have to contact support or send the damn thing back." 2 days later, the camera hadn't malfunctioned again, and I'd all but forgotten about the issue. But as we were getting home from eating out after a parent-teacher conference at Raymond's kindergarten, I had a sense of déjà vu. We were all walking up from the SUV in the driveway, and I had this strange feeling I'd been there before. I shrugged it off as we went up the steps. Then, as I reached out to unlock and open the door for my wife and child, I glanced down at a small blue and white stuffed elephant clutched in my son's hand. I suddenly remembered the video from 2 days before. We all moved inside the house, and I recalled that Andrea and Raymond had gone off to play with one of the claw machines after we'd finished eating at the restaurant. When they'd arrived back at the table, I'd been talking to the server about getting some to-go boxes, so I hadn't noticed the animal. I thought about this for the rest of the night, but I didn't mention it to Andrea. I don't know why. It just seemed so crazy. I figured there was some mistake, like maybe Raymond had a second identical plush elephant I just hadn't noticed. There was a reasonable explanation for it. It certainly wasn't possible that my doorbell camera was able to see into the future. That was ridiculous. But later that night, when I was lying awake in bed, my phone buzzed with an alert. I checked it, seeing that it was another video clip. I watched a video of me walking wearily up to the house. My shirt was bloody, hair disheveled, and my face was twisted in a pained grimace. A week passed, and I kept thinking about that video. I watched it again and again. I grew tired from the lack of sleep. My work suffered. I kept telling myself it was ludicrous. There was some kind of mistake, some weird glitch. Andrea kept asking me what was wrong, and I kept telling her that I just wasn't feeling well, which was true. I just didn't tell her why. I figured she'd think I was crazy. Every time I left the house, I was paranoid something would happen to me, and I kept checking my phone for more videos. But no more like that one came. Not then. Finally, Andrea came home an hour early one day and said, "We're taking you to urgent care. I want you to get checked out. I'll make an appointment with Dr. Rowe, I said to get her off my back. No, I know you. You won't make an appointment. And even if you do, you'll cancel. So we're going to go to the urgent care and you're going to get checked out, okay? This has gone on long enough. After a little more of this, I agreed. We all gathered up in the SUV and Andrea drove us to the urgent care. I knew I would get a clean bill of health, but I also knew it would get Andrea off my back until I figured out what the heck was going on. When it was my turn to see the doctor, I got up, leaving Andrea and Raymond in the waiting room with about a dozen other people. A nurse led me back toward a line of exam rooms, and as we approached one, gunfire erupted from the waiting room. Screams punctuated the short silences between gunshots. I froze, looking toward the door to the waiting area. After a moment of sheer terror, I ran toward the door, bursting out into the waiting room to see the front door closing as a man with a semi-auto rifle and tactical gear went running outside, firing into the parking lot of the strip mall. The waiting room was a mess of blood and writhing bodies. I ran up to where Andrea and Ray had been sitting, finding their lifeless bodies on the floor. I pulled them to my chest and screamed, and screamed, and screamed. The police had found and killed the mass shooter. But this did little to console me as I got home in the early morning after spending hours answering questions from the police. As I walked up the stairs and into the house, I knew that the video I'd seen a week ago would match exactly my arrival home. The blood, the look on my face, the messed up hair, everything. I went to my bedroom and retrieved my pistol from my closet. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, the pistol in front of me, loaded and ready to go. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, not surprised to see that it was another video captured by the camera. On the video, a couple of paramedics were wheeling a gurney out of my house with a body on it, covered in a sheet. I knew it was my body under that sheet, with a bullet hole in my head. But then the screen glitched out, and when it cleared, it showed a different video. This one was of me greeting my friends on the front porch as they brought me food and condolences. Then it jumped again and showed me getting home with my mother and father, all of us dressed in funeral attire. Then it showed me bringing a puppy home. It showed the dog Bigger as we left the house for a walk. It showed me working in the yard. And the last video was me looking considerably older, arriving home with a woman I didn't recognize. She was holding a bundled up newborn baby in her arms. And that was it. 2 possibilities, life or death. But it didn't make any sense. If it weren't for the video of me showing up at home, bloody and distraught, we would have never gone to the urgent care. Andrea and Raymond would still be alive. So what was this? Was it telling me I had a choice? Or was it just taunting me? As I set my phone down next to the pistol, it didn't really feel like I had a choice. The hurt was just too much. But I did have a choice. I could use the phone to call someone to help me through this terrible time. Or I could use the gun and make the hurt go away. Life or death, phone or gun. I stood on my front porch and yelled into the quiet neighborhood. Ah! After hooting and hollering a few more times, I headed back inside, figuring that would do the trick. Then I grabbed my phone and powered on my new doorbell camera. Let's see how this baby works. After grabbing a chair from the kitchen, I sat 10 feet back from my closed front door and watched the video feed on my phone. It didn't take long for a man to come running down the street. He made a beeline for my front door. There was an electric whirring sound from the camera panel installed next to the door. As the man got to the porch steps, there was a thunderous boom. The guy's head flew apart, and he fell to the ground. Ah! Holy shit! I said, jumping up from my seat. I stepped to the front door, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened it, looking at the bloody mess at the bottom of my porch steps. Zed's dead, baby, I said, quoting my favorite movie. Zed's dead. Then another person came running down the street. This one was a woman. I shut the door, locked it, and stepped back, bringing up my phone again. That whirring sound came again. Target acquisition. She got to the porch steps. Boom! And then was thrown backward as the shotgun blast hit her in the chest. Then the automated gun moved again and finished the job with a blast to the head. Ah! I said, slapping my thigh. Glitchy my ass. This thing seems to work fine. I don't know what all those negative reviews were talking about. Bunch of crybabies. Another person came up, but this guy wasn't running. Probably because one of his legs was messed up. He shambled like most of the zombies you see in movies. Hell, if all the zombies had moved like him, I wouldn't have needed the doorbell camera system. I could just sit on my porch with my shotgun and pick them off as they came close. But no, many of them were fast fuckers. I watched on my phone as the guy shambled up and had his face blown away by the system. I stood up and walked over to the panel next to the door. There was a box of shotgun shells on the table nearby, and I grabbed them. Once I had the panel open, I loaded the thing full again. Then I waited about 10 more minutes to see if any more zombies would show. When none did, I went to the backyard, skirting the large fire pit in the middle of the yard with charred bones in it. I got into my shed and donned a thick rubber coat, a mask, goggles, and gloves. Then I headed around the side to get to work, dragging the zombie bodies to my fire pit. If I left them out too long, I'd be fined by the HOA. As I moved into the front yard, I stepped and shook my head. Apparently, the system could tell the difference between a human and a zombie, but I wasn't willing to take the chance, so I shut it off and then got to work. As I bent down to grab one of the bodies, I heard the slap of footsteps from the street. 2 zombies were coming from different directions, both of them running like goddamn Olympic sprinters. I ran up to my front door and tried to open it, but it was locked, and I'd left the keys inside. Shit! I said, scrambling from my phone as the zombies rushed toward me. With shaking hands, I finally got the system back on just as they got to the porch steps. Both zombies went down. God damn, I said, still shaking. That was close. And as I stepped away from the door, I heard the whir of the gun changing direction. Oh shit! Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.